All right, we're going to jump right into these. A lot of us are having great conversations, like the other stuff that I have to finish. But before we do, to get into the understanding of the nervous system and how it interacts, we have to kind of take a step back like everything else and look at it like we've been talking on more of a molecular universal level that comes down into the body, and how the synergies between each one of these interact. And that has been something as the more that I've worked with this and I'm starting to kind of modify some of the stuff that has been taught to me, and as we've gone down some things, is actually very interesting. But we got to break it down into the three trilogy that I don't think anyone would argue with, which is the mind, the body, and then this is obviously the area that a lot of debate goes, and I want to be very clear here. This is not a religious type scenario. If it is and you are down that road, that is absolutely fantastic. However, this I want to keep on a very scientific standard. And in that is the spirit, the will, the energy, whatever you want to name it, or whatever your belief system is in those directions, is that ability that we can will or create a mind over matter type scenario with our molecular body. And I want to use that word molecular because when we look at each one of these things, we still have to look so small that each one of these is still together in an energy and also on a molecular basis. As we back up, each one of them have a coordinating response to the other. Meaning, the mind is the computer system that allows us to function through the central nervous system, the nerve endings, that particular electric system that is the conduit of the energy, as we've kind of worded it throughout time, that goes into the body, or the physical structure that we have that is a coordinated musculature part of our systems. And then of course we go into the actual spirit, will, or energy that is there. And the reason that I want to show this is because as I go into, and we're going to bring my son in here in a little bit, and I'm going to show you that there comes a certain point that no matter how much you will something, that we have to look at the synergy or the balances between each aspect of all we are to show ourselves as a complete or 100% of performance potential. And that's where it took a while to kind of coordinate and choreograph what I wanted to say, because there's so many avenues I want to go with this, but I'm going to try to narrow it down in a small fashion. And a lot of the questions were, okay, now that you know all this, what do you do with it? And that's a great question, because obviously having intellect is only so far if we can't put it to application. And the application standard, then we have to break down into what has been requested. In this area, we're looking at a physical advancement. So in this, we're not talking in spiritual, which it will have a benefit to for relaxation, meditations, finding a centering and those type of areas. But we're looking for an actual physical transfer. How do I create the understanding of what isn't working at its best potentials? And then what do I do about those to activate it at a higher potential? Now, we can go down this road farther, or we can go down this road farther. Either road does not matter to me in the least bit. However, what does matter is that if we don't understand what we're talking about, any road we go ends up nowhere. And that's not what I want to have happen. I want us to get to where everybody understands, or those that are following in these areas, that we get to that point. So we're going to talk just physical basics and how we can see that and start to break it down into smaller planes, break it into programming for actual specificities of sports. We can actually see that into smaller areas. And again, we can take this as far as we want, but I'm going to put it into a generality, obviously, at this time, because this is very, very advanced, and it's literally spherical, like everything else, to look at going that every movement we have has hundreds, or even farther down if we want to go that far, and most don't want to take it to that level, and that's completely understandable. But if you're that kind of person, that methodical, that you want to do that, that's a great road for someone to go down. If it's something that you're just looking at to go, and hey, how do I get a little bit more out of my bench press, and I'm noticing I'm not getting a certain amount of power in certain places, how come? We're going to see that. I'm going to show that. And the other thing, and we're going to break it down to super general, is that most trainers or most people out there in any sport set you up in a certain thing that you notice that in your bench press, or they ask you, like in your squat positions, on why you're locking into a centered position. There is not just a physical attribute, which we need to look at. Okay, we want to look at the best biomechanical position. There's also a mind attribute that kicks in that creates the understanding, the computer programs itself to be maximally or as high optimally as possible for muscle efficiency or surgencies that we call motor patterning, that we then go into, we can turn up the will while these are in synchronocracy or together in synergy. As we're going to see, and I'm going to make adjustments, you will see the body, the mind starts to understand that will give you that power or that percentage in certain aspects, but it deters or it actually shuts down other aspects at certain points or certain angles or certain movements with reason. That's hard to understand. I know in verbal you will see it. If you really want to take it to the next levels, get to somebody that understands this, that can physically do it to you, and it literally is something that it is unexplainable until it occurs. Because you think that you are in full control at every range and every capacity of your body, and it quickly teaches you that that is absolutely not accurate. That bothered an individual like myself that has a mind that loves accuracy percentages, because now I'm looking at this going, okay, we have an entire new area of development that goes back to Leonardo da Vinci and other studies that have gone clean back into Egyptology and prior. If you really want to go into those kind of areas, you can start to adapt that. Nikola Tesla touched on it in certain areas. You can kind of reference him or look at some of these, and we have sent these out to some of the other people. And that's why you're seeing some of those things that we're putting online. Even with the ones that we've put up here recently on the storyline, you're seeing one molecular cell of a brain trying and reaching out to find and become part of the bigger whole. And I need that thinking for those who really want to be advanced to understand that the mind, although it is this big ball that we see if we crack the skull and open it up, is intricate down to that one single little cell all the way down that we can't even see, that's out there reaching, trying to connect into the unity of an entire mass of cells that we've labeled a brain. That's how far down these studies can go and are, because even though our education systems or our personal time that we haven't gone down those particular paths so far, the universe itself has done that, and we are built that way, whether we understand it as humans or animals or mammalic or however you want to word that or not. That's how far this can go, because as we try to manipulate the system backwards and look at it going, the universe owes me, the universe is sitting here going, you have to learn from me and catch up to me. I've been here forever. You're only going to be here under 100 years. We're not the same. If you look at some of the other studies that we've put in there with the molecular developmentals and some of those changes and some of the neuros and some of the neuromuscular, when you're looking at the transfer of it going into the neurons themselves and transferring over to the use of the muscle, we then have to also understand that the brain has only been trained with what we've taught it throughout our lifetime, and it's recorded through our cells everything we have done in every aspect. We may not remember it in the front part of the mind, but everything else does. You may not even think about the reason you don't touch a stove anymore. You just know that as soon as you feel that heat around your hand and the hand pulls back before you even realize it's there, because this now understands on a reception point that that's hot. This actually is taking time to get to, and the body is going into survival mode to prepare for what it's already had occur somewhere in history. Now, I know that's a lot of information. That's exactly what I wanted. I want to give everybody a large amount of information to hand, because everybody's going to take different pieces of different parts that they're at, and they're going to go their own directions, and that's exactly what I like to occur. That's how I like to do things, to create as much thought process for as many people in their areas of the areas they're going. Creates a great conversation, obviously, and then later on, a great communication between people of what they've learned in different areas that allow everyone's minds to be opened up in different ways. But again, when we go back and we look at this, and as I start to bring my son in, and I want to use him for a reason, he's young, he's an athlete, but he's not a professional. And to me, people can associate with looking at that and what do you do with that? Of, okay, I've got a young wrestler and what can I do with it? I've got a young fighter and what can I do with it? Or what am I looking for those people who are looking for that? And some of the studies that we have done and have used and obviously have gone down. This goes back again, started with J.L. Holdsworth. I want to note that because I always love to give credit where credit's due, who got me down those directions. It had been something that I'd already been trying to figure out, knowing that it was there, but unfortunately that, as you're seeing even now, informations like this are not readily available. It is something that, bouncing around with Westside Barbell, that we have figured out with some of the conversations, but how do you transfer that application? And is there a thing that goes with it, with science behind it, with provability, that the guy that wants the stack of 10 feet high of science, and here's the science, as you're going to see as the individual, as soon as it does or doesn't work, that becomes the science of going, if it does and doesn't work and then does work, there's science behind it. And a lot of people do know that science, and it is out there to a degree. You just have to really search for it. But I want to show it. And the reason I want people to see this is a lot of coaching and a lot of people out there, both in intellectual side and in physical side, which again, there's the synergy between the two, an ebb and flow on a constant basis. We do want to look at that and go, if this does have a variable in there and we're looking at something as simple as a bench press, it can change the percentage of output. If it advances to a specificity, and let's use again, say a jiu-jitsuist, it can change how much power goes to a specific arm in a specific position that can become dangerous, and we'll know it just by changing the body and certain parts that unfold. That as soon as we see that occurring, we know that he won't have as strong of position, not just if we created a physical capacity, but the neurological just shuts off the arm. That means that the muscle itself is still capable to flex or contract at a high rate. It just doesn't, because the electrical, the brain says no, it deregulates, no different than the snow variable of a car. It then takes the power down in the arm. And you're going to see this, and I want people to note that. But I want to start off with this conversation and putting it out there, because it's going to take a minute to get just through this and going, what is this guy even trying to say? There's a lot there. And the speculation, again, is we have a control panel, we have a physical panel, and then we have an energy system that is transferred through the energy systems of electrical wiring, of however you want to look at that. And that this synergy between these are even not in a triangular fashion, but in a circular fashion, working in a coordinated balance and synergy between each other on a constant ratio of interacting, where we try to break it apart and goes, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. And universally it goes, no, it all happened. And it responds equally of going, I've registered and understand that all at one time. And then the opposite and equal is then it all regulates or offset the physics of opposite and equal, that will then coordinatedly put in a position of going, okay, I'm going to deregulate or increase regulation or allow it or not allow it, however I can break that down far enough. I want to make sure I get this down far enough to create the ability or lack of ability in those particular areas. And then it's on us, like training, of going, where's the weak areas? Finding those weaknesses and making them strengths. How do we see them? How do we adjust once we see them? And that becomes the questions in anything that we're looking at in studies of future stuff, if you're looking at collegiate or anything that you're doing for your own entrepreneurial type mentality, or if we're looking at a physical transfer to where it's like, okay, how do I become better in those areas? It does, again, have that ebb and flow. So I hope that breaks it down in a second there with a lot of information quickly, and why chaotic also is an advancement as we look at. But in this general thing, I'm going to show some very, very basic stuff with him and try to give as much information, again, as I can in a small area, and let it kind of piece together as you're watching, if you are watching those, taking the time to kind of piece it out and take what out of it what you'd like. So we'll start right there and go from there. Thank you.